They say if you want to know the strength of something, look at what it survives. Back then, I thought our life was strong enough to survive anything. My name is Edward Barnes. I'm 34 years old, and I run a custom auto restoration shop in a small town called Dalton, Georgia. Population just over 10,000, where folks still wave from their porches and Sunday potlucks are considered a social calendar. I've lived here all my life. Grew up in a house built by my grandfather, raised by parents who believed in sweat equity and dinner table honesty. My dad ran a lumber mill, and my mom worked part-time at the post office. They didn't have much, but what they did have, they earned. I started my shop in a rented cinder block building behind the old hardware store. Just me, a ratchet set, and a stack of flyers. By the time I was 30, I'd moved into a full lot off Main Street and had 6 employees, all locals, some fresh out of high school, others who'd worked on engines since they were kids. We specialized in restoring old muscle cars and vintage trucks. Word of mouth did the rest. I met Monica at a charity car show fundraiser about 6 years ago. She was there representing a PR firm out of Atlanta, snapping photos and writing blurbs for some glossy lifestyle magazine. I was there to show off a fully rebuilt '67 Chevy Camaro. I was in coveralls. She was in heels that probably cost more than my monthly utility bill. But she walked right up to me and said, "You smell like grease and pine tar. That means you actually work for a living." I laughed. She smiled. That was the start. Monica had this fire about her, sharp, confident, the kind of person who never once hesitated when she had something to say. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot in a small ceremony at a vineyard in northern Georgia. She wanted something simple but elegant, and I just wanted her to be happy. So we compromised, which meant we had a string quartet, and I wore a BLO tie instead of a regular one. We bought a modest brick house on the edge of town. Quiet street, 2-car garage, decent yard. We adopted a dog and, 2 years later, had our daughter Ava. For a while, life was the way it should be. I worked long hours, but I was home for dinner most nights. Monica did freelance marketing and worked part-time for a local nonprofit. We weren't rich, but we were solid, reliable, like the trucks I rebuilt from the frame up. Looking back, I can't say when the cracks started. There was no big moment, no screaming match or slam door. Just space. A little more each day. Monica started staying in her office after Ava went to bed. I started falling asleep on the couch with the TV on. She stopped texting me in the middle of the day. I stopped asking what she was working on. We still smiled for family photos. Still kissed goodbye. But the warmth was fading. And I didn't know yet that what we had built, this life I was so proud of, had already started to buckle beneath the surface. I just kept telling myself, we're fine. This is just what marriage looks like after a few years. I didn't know it yet, but I was wrong. Dead wrong. It was a Wednesday night. I remember because I was late getting home after helping a guy named Pete Simmons haul his '76 Ford Bronco back from the side of Route 9. His transmission gave out, and he didn't have AAA. It was raining, Ava was already asleep when I walked in, and the house smelled like something had been cooked and forgotten. Monica sat at the kitchen table with a glass of red wine, her face blank. Her plate was half-eaten. Mine was still covered in foil. "Sorry," I said, wiping water from my neck. Pete's truck died in the middle of nowhere. Took forever to get it winched. She didn't say anything, just swirled her wine like she was measuring time in circles. "You eat?" I asked, pulling the foil off my plate. "I lost my appetite," she said, then stood. "Actually, we need to talk." My hand froze mid-air. "Okay," I said slowly, lowering the fork. "Is everything all right?" She leaned against the sink, arms crossed. Her shoulders looked heavier than usual, like she'd been carrying something all day. "I want a break," she said flatly. "From us." The words didn't compute. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "You want a break?" I repeated. "Yes." "From what? Like a trip?" "A weekend off." "No, Edward. A break from all of this." She motioned vaguely around the kitchen. "Marriage. Motherhood. Everything." That hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. "You're not happy?" She laughed once, dry and sharp. "Happy? I don't even feel like a person anymore. I'm just a mother, a wife, a house manager. I go through the motions, and no one even notices." "I notice," I said quietly. "You're the glue holding this house together." Her jaw tensed. "Don't do that. Don't throw some bumper sticker praise at me and think it fixes years of emotional neglect." "Neglect?" I blinked. "Monica, I work 60 hours a week to keep this place running. And I spend 60 hours feeling invisible," she snapped. "You come home and fall asleep with your boots on. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time you asked me how I was? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She looked away. I'm suffocating, Edward. And before you suggest it, I don't want a weekend getaway. I don't need a bath and a bottle of wine. I need space. Then I said it. I don't even know why. Is there someone else? She flinched. Just for a second. But it was enough. I need space, she said again, turning toward the hallway. That's all you need to know. She left the wine on the table and closed the bedroom door behind her. And for the first time, I didn't follow. I just stood there, soaking wet, with a forkful of cold chicken in my hand and something unspoken ripping a hole straight through my chest. The thing about trust is, once it slips, everything feels like evidence. At first, I told myself not to make something out of nothing. People go through phases. People get tired. Maybe Monica just needed breathing room. Maybe I'd been too focused on work, too blind to how lonely she felt. But after that night, nothing felt the same. She started staying out later, calling it soul care time. Said she was taking up creative writing again, meeting people online, reconnecting with herself. But it wasn't the writing group that bothered me, it was how guarded she became about it. She started keeping her phone face down on the table. Set up a second lock screen passcode. Would take calls in the laundry room with the dryer running like it was some CIA operation. I'd hear her laugh, a soft, flirty sound I hadn't heard in years. Then silence when I walked in, like I was the interruption. One night, I was working late in the shop when my buddy Greg stopped by. We grew up together, fixed up our first junker in high school. He dropped off some beers, kicked back on the bench near my lift. Hey, he said, almost casually, how's Monica doing? All right, I guess. I kept my voice even. She's been a little distant. Greg scratched the back of his neck. Lisa mentioned something kinda weird the other day. Said Monica's been real active in that fantasy writers forum she's in. Like, really active. Yeah? I know she's been into it. She's been talking a lot about this guy, Julian. He glanced at me. Lisa said Monica's messages are intense, like borderline poetic, which would be fine, except she's also been making jokes about how guys who fix cars for a living don't understand emotional depth. I stopped what I was doing. She said that. I asked. Greg nodded slowly. Lisa showed me one of the posts. Monica called Julian her mental equal and said being around you was like trying to talk to a wrench. He looked guilty just repeating it. I wasn't going to say anything, but I thought you should know. I felt the heat rising in my face, but I swallowed it down. Julian, I repeated. The name sat on my tongue like bad oil. Yeah, supposedly some Vermont guy. Writes poetry for some blog no one's heard of. Lives with a cat named Fern. That night, Monica came home late again. Said she went for a drive to clear her head. She smelled like rosemary and sandalwood, some new perfume I hadn't seen before. I didn't ask questions. I just watched. I watched how she kept her phone tethered to her hand like a lifeline. I watched how she smiled when a notification popped up and how fast she'd hide the screen. Something had changed that I could no longer deny. I went out to the garage, stood by my toolbox, and just stared at the wall. My hands itched, not from labor, but from restraint. From knowing there was something right in front of me, and I still didn't have proof. But I would. Soon. It happened on a Thursday morning while Monica was in the shower. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen table, screen still glowing. Normally, I wouldn't even think to touch it. But after weeks of her whispering into her phone, disappearing for hours, and avoiding eye contact like it burned, I couldn't take it anymore. The moment I saw her messages, I knew I had been right. The chat was in some online writing platform, tucked behind folders labeled character studies and workshop notes. But what it really was a live stream of betrayal. Messages between her and Julian, Vermont. His profile picture was some moody black and white selfie with a quote underneath about passion being the only true oxygen. He started with compliments. She replied with poetry. I scrolled. Her, you make me feel seen in a way I forgot was possible. Julian, that's because I look beyond the skin and into the soul. Not everyone has one worth writing about. Her, Edward is dependable, but he talks about engine mounts like they're sacred texts. I'm so tired of being the only dreamer in a garage full of socket wrenches. Julian, you were never meant to live small. Come here. We'll build a life that breathes. My chest went tight. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until it burned. I kept reading. They weren't just flirting. They were planning. She'd sent him pictures of Ava, captioned my reason and my tether, as if our daughter was just another character in her escapist fantasy. And then this, buried deep in the thread. I've looked into child support options. Vermont laws favor stability over history. If Edward's work keeps him tied to Georgia, that could help us. Help us. Julian didn't have a job. He ran a blog with 4 readers and made playlists called Emotional Alchemy. But she was already imagining a custody arrangement where our toddler was a bullet point. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the damn laptop across the room. But instead, I took screenshots, every message, every timestamp, every photo she sent. I copied the thread and emailed it to myself. Then I quietly closed the laptop, cleaned the smudges off the trackpad, and made sure it looked untouched. When Monica came into the kitchen wrapped in her towel, humming like she hadn't just detonated our marriage behind my back, I smiled at her. I poured her coffee. I kissed the top of her head. She didn't notice the shake in my hand. That day, I didn't go to the shop. I drove to a lawyer 2 towns over. Sat in a waiting room flipping through a magazine I didn't read and waited for a man named David Mercer, who came highly recommended for custody and divorce work. I gave him the short version. He didn't blink. Said we could begin paperwork immediately. I walked out of that office with a folder and a plan. Let Monica keep playing house with her Vermont poet fantasy. Because I was done guessing. Now, I was preparing. After that day, I stopped reacting and started calculating. I kept my head down and played the part, husband, father, routine man. But inside, I was already detaching. I became someone new. Not colder, exactly. Just focused. Protective. Everything I used to invest in saving my marriage, I started pouring into protecting Ava. The first thing I did was call David Mercer back and ask about surveillance laws. Since the house was under my name only, and Georgia was a one-party consent state, I had every legal right to install cameras in shared spaces. So I did. Discreetly. 1 in the living room, another in the kitchen, a third in the hallway outside Ava's room. Nothing in the bedrooms. I wasn't interested in that kind of proof. I already knew what I needed to know. Next came the finances. I started separating our accounts quietly. I removed Monica as an authorized user on my business card and created a new personal checking account. All new deposits, shop revenue, side project payments, even a tax return, went into that new account. The joint account stayed open with just enough in it to keep appearances steady, enough to cover groceries and gas. She didn't notice. Not even when I stopped handing her my pay stubs for taxes. She was too wrapped up in whatever dreamscape Julian was feeding her. Her writing nights became longer. Her phone buzzed nonstop. She spent mornings scrolling while Ava played by herself on the living room rug, asking, "Mommy, look at this," again and again without ever getting a glance. I started keeping a notebook. Not the emotional kind, just a record. Date. Time. Incident. Ava's diaper rash untreated for 3 days. Monica left her in a soaked pull-up while she was on the porch doing breathwork with her eyes closed. Dinner skipped twice in 1 week. Monica said she was resetting her energy. Ava cried herself to sleep hungry. I wrote it all down. I adjusted my schedule at the shop. Passed off 2 engine rebuilds to Mason and Jordan, cut my hours back by 10 a week. I told the crew I wanted to spend more time with my daughter. No one questioned it. In fact, most of them respected it. Greg gave me a pat on the back and said, "You're doing the right thing, man. Don't let her mess that kid up." I didn't plan to file yet. Not until I had everything lined up. I needed leverage. I needed consistency. I needed to be undeniable. So I documented. Every night after Monica went to bed, I pulled out my folder, updated my entries, saved video clips to a secure drive, and checked off small legal steps with David. Custody was the endgame. Full custody, if possible. At minimum, primary. Ava needed stability. And God help me, she wasn't going to grow up thinking her dad sat back and let her be dragged into someone else's delusion. By month's end, I had a stack of notes, time-stamped footage, a paper trail of responsible parenting, and a lawyer who told me I was building one of the cleanest cases he'd ever seen. Monica had no idea. She still smiled vaguely at me over breakfast, her mind 1,000 miles away in Vermont, or wherever Julian was feeding her soul that day. That was fine. Let her dream. I was wide awake. Monica didn't just drift further. She seemed to morph into someone I barely recognized. She started talking to me like I was an employee. Post-it notes on the fridge. Lists of mental load, tasks I apparently hadn't handled. Order Ava's new shoes, set pediatrician appointment, check school registration deadline. All things I'd already done, weeks ago, in some cases. But it was like she had to reframe it. Make it look like I was falling behind so she could feel like she was pulling all the weight. The irony burned. She spent more time on Zoom calls with her life coach than she did playing with Ava. The coach's name was Serafina. That's what Monica said, anyway. She never showed her face in the group sessions Monica streamed from the living room. Just airy voiceovers about nurturing the inner goddess and discarding outdated attachments. Outdated attachments. That's what I'd become. One night, I found a printed worksheet on the counter. Monica had left it out while she took a call in the bedroom. It was from Serafina, some journal exercise about visualizing your ideal partner. Monica had filled it out in purple pen. Creative. Emotionally intelligent. Deeply expressive. Listens to poetry while cooking. Doesn't worship productivity. Hates the smell of gasoline. Wears soft clothes. Asks why instead of how much. I didn't see my name in any of it. But I did see Julian. When I finally confronted her, it wasn't even an argument. It was like I was interrupting her meditating. You're rewriting our life to fit this fantasy, I said, holding up the worksheet. You're building some version of me that never existed just so you can justify leaving. She didn't even blink. Edward, she said like I was being unreasonable, you're so obsessed with evidence and tasks and control. You can't even begin to understand what I need. I stared at her, genuinely stunned. What you need? Monica, I've cut my hours, taken over parenting, documented everything to make sure this house doesn't fall apart while you chase enlightenment in online chat rooms. She scoffed. This is why I can't talk to you. You're small-minded, always stuck in logic and plans. You're not present. You don't feel anything. That's when it hit me, she had already replaced me in her head. This wasn't about logic or emotion anymore. This was about Monica needing me to be the villain in her story so she could play the brave, misunderstood heroine. I nodded slowly. All right, I said. If that's the story you want, you can have it. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. In that moment, something shut off in me. Not out of anger. Not even heartbreak. Just clarity. I wasn't in a marriage anymore. I was in a story someone else was writing, and I had finally decided to stop being the background character. It all came to a head on a Monday afternoon. I was wiping Ava's hands after lunch when Monica came breezing through the front door, humming and texting, like she hadn't just been gone for 5 hours without saying a word. She kissed the top of Ava's head in passing and headed straight to her office. I followed. I stood in the doorway, watching her type. We need to talk. She didn't look up. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something. No, I said, calm but firm. This can't wait. She sighed like I'd asked her to vacuum the moon. Okay, what now? I walked in and placed a manila folder on her desk. She glanced at it, then back at me. What's this? Proof, I said. Of everything. She opened the folder slowly. The screenshots. The printouts. The notations. The email logs. Even a timeline of her absences cross-referenced with Ava's neglected needs. She skimmed the first few pages and her face went pale. What is this supposed to mean? She asked, voice already rising. It means I know, I said. About Julian. About your plan to move to Vermont. About the conversations you've been having behind my back. She tried to laugh, shrill and weak. You're spying on me? I'm protecting my daughter, I replied. Her eyes flashed. This is insane. You're controlling. You're paranoid. You're trying to twist everything to make yourself look like the victim. No, I said. I'm just done pretending. I've spoken to a lawyer. I've gathered the evidence. I've documented everything. You want out? Fine. But Ava stays with me. Her mouth opened and closed, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or scream. You can't do that, she said finally, voice shaking. I already did, I said. Legally, the house is mine. I've already shifted the finances. You've been too distracted to even notice. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. This is emotional warfare. You're punishing me for wanting something different. No, I said. I'm holding you accountable. You've been emotionally absent, reckless, and negligent. Ava deserves better. I won't let her be dragged into a fantasy built on online poetry and midlife delusions. She started crying then. Big, heaving sobs that sounded rehearsed. She clutched her chest like I had broken her heart. Edward, please, she gasped. We can fix this. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't budge. She dropped to her knees. Don't do this. Don't take her from me. I was just lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I looked down at her, hollow. You had months to figure that out. I gave you every chance. Then she switched tactics. If you do this, I'll fight you in court. I'll make you look like a tyrant. I'll tell them you installed cameras, that you're trying to manipulate the system. Go ahead, I said. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. And if this goes to court, I'll bring it all. She sat back on her heels, mascara running, rage slowly overtaking the panic. So what, you're kicking me out? I'm giving you a choice, I said. You have 1 week to move out. You can do it clean, or you can drag it through the courts. But either way, it's done. She looked around like she didn't recognize the room anymore. Like she didn't recognize me. But I had never been clearer. No yelling. No theatrics. Just a man standing in what used to be his home, drawing the final line. And for once, Monica couldn't cross it. Family court isn't dramatic like you see on TV. It's quiet. Clinical. Like someone draining a sink slowly, one turn of the faucet at a time. Monica showed up to the first hearing in a flowing beige dress like she was going to brunch instead of fighting for custody. Her lawyer looked flustered and unprepared, like he'd been handed her case 10 minutes before walking in. Mine, David Mercer, was the opposite. Organized. Focused. Dead calm. The man didn't flinch once. The judge was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone. She reviewed everything silently for the first few minutes. No interruptions. Just turning page after page of the binder David had assembled. Videos, photos, messages, childcare records, time logs, written statements from Ava's pediatrician and 2 of my shop employees who had seen me bring her in during Monica's evenings out. Monica started off trying to charm the court. Said she was reclaiming her identity and that the separation was about finding peace, not conflict. She called me rigid and said I was cold and emotionally stunted, but didn't deny that I'd been Ava's primary caregiver for months. Her biggest mistake was trying to pass her behavior off as a phase. Then David stood and played one of the video clips, Monica pacing the kitchen, yelling on the phone to Julian, saying she was drowning in obligation and that Ava cries all the time and it's like babysitting a stranger. I'd watched that clip 10 times already. It still stung, but the judge didn't flinch, just made a small mark in her notes. Then came the messages. Pages of flotation, mockery, plans to uproot Ava and move to Vermont. One particularly damning exchange had Monica laughing about how easy it would be to build a better version of life once she shed all this Georgia deadweight. I watched Monica wilt in real time. Her fake calm gave way to twitchy eyes and jittery fingers. She whispered something to her lawyer. He didn't look hopeful. The judge finally looked up. Mrs. Barnes, she said plainly, I'm not seeing consistent behavior that demonstrates stable parenting. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern. Monica's voice cracked. I didn't mean any of it. I was confused. I was venting. That's not who I am. But it is what you did, the judge replied. The ruling came down that afternoon. I was granted primary custody. Monica would have supervised visitation, 3 hours twice a week, until she could prove consistent employment, housing stability, and participation in a parenting program. She didn't cry. Not in court. But I saw the light dim in her eyes when the gavel dropped. Later, I learned from Greg that Julian had blocked her not long after I confronted her. Took off with some crowd-funded poetry advance she'd sent him and ghosted her completely. Turns out, the soulful blogger from Vermont had a long trail of failed romances behind him, and Monica was just his latest muse. No romantic retreat. No new life. Just a woman sitting in a borrowed apartment, grasping at a fantasy that had slipped through her fingers the moment reality came knocking. And me? I walked out of that courtroom holding Ava's tiny hand in mine. We didn't look back. It was 3 months later when Monica showed up at my shop. She didn't call, didn't text, just appeared in the parking lot one Tuesday morning, standing there in a worn-out cardigan and flats that didn't match. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her eyes were ringed with shadows she couldn't have covered if she tried. I was changing out brake pads on a 72 El Camino when I saw her through the bay door. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. She waved softly. I stood, wiped my hands, and walked out to meet her. Hey, she said, voice small. Do you have a minute? I looked over my shoulder at the guys in the shop. Yeah, 5. We sat on the bench out front, next to the vending machine. She looked down at her hands. I've been doing the parenting program, she said. Got a job. It's not much, just admin work, but it's steady. I'm trying. I nodded. That's good. She nodded too, lips pressed tight. Julian's gone. Blocked me on everything. Took some money I wired for. I don't even know what. Said he was going to publish a book. Probably never existed. I didn't say I told you so. She already knew. I think I lost my mind for a while, she said, barely a whisper. I kept telling myself I was chasing something meaningful, but I think I was just trying to get away from myself. I stayed quiet. She turned to look at me. Edward, I'm sorry. For all of it. For how I treated you. For what I said about our life. I didn't see what I had until it was gone. I studied her face. There was no fight left in her. Just a woman finally facing the aftermath of her own wreckage. I'm not here to beg, she said quickly. But I wanted to ask if there's any chance we could talk. Really talk. Maybe go to dinner sometime. Just us. I shook my head slowly. Monica, I can't do that. Her eyes dropped. Right? Of course. It's not anger, I added. It's just, I spent months fixing something that only I wanted to keep standing. And now, I've built something different. Something better. For me and Ava. She nodded, swallowing hard. Do you think we'll ever be okay? Even just as people. For Ava's sake, yeah? I'll always work with you when it comes to her. I'm not shutting you out. But anything beyond that, it's not there anymore. Her shoulders sagged. I get it, she said, her voice barely holding. I just thought, maybe you'd still have something left. I have something left, I said gently. It's just not for you anymore. She started to cry then, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. I didn't move to comfort her. When she finally stood, she wiped her face and nodded. Thank you, she said, for being kinder than I deserved. I didn't say anything back, just watched her walk away, slower than she came, like each step weighed more than the last. That night, I tucked Ava in and sat on the edge of her bed a little longer than usual. We were okay, and that had to be enough. It's funny how peace doesn't make a sound when it shows up. It just slides in one morning while you're pouring cereal and realize your chest doesn't feel heavy anymore. That's what life feels like now. Peaceful. I met Rachel during Ava's 6-month checkup, about 2 weeks after the court ruling. She was the nurse who gave Ava her booster shots, talked to her gently, like she was more than a chart. Ava took to her instantly. So did I. We ran into each other again at the grocery store, then again at the farmer's market. By the third accidental meeting, I asked if she wanted to grab coffee. She smiled and said, "Took you long enough." Rachel isn't flashy. She doesn't talk about manifesting or run writing forums. She listens. She notices things, like how I rub the back of my neck when I'm tired, or how Ava likes her apple slices without the skin. She doesn't pretend to understand cars, but she'll stand next to me in the garage and ask what each tool does just because she wants to know. She doesn't look down on grease stains. Says they mean I work with my hands, and that's something too many men have forgotten how to do. We've been dating for 4 months now. Nothing loud. No big social media posts. Just quiet dinners, playground mornings, and slow Sunday drives with Ava in the back seat singing made-up songs. I restructured my shop this spring. Promoted Mason to lead mechanic, reduced my workweek to 4 days. Gave the guys raises where I could, and made sure the office had a better schedule for me to be home more. That was the whole point anyway, building something to live off of, not live inside. Ava's playroom now takes up what used to be Monica's office. Painted it a soft green, filled it with bookshelves, craft bins, a reading nook under the window. Built her a little wooden tool bench too. Painted it pink like she asked. She calls it Daddy's Corner. Sometimes I catch her pretending to fix her stuffed animals, saying things like, "You're all better now, just like Dad does." That's when I know I did the right thing. As for Monica, she's around. She shows up for visitations. She's trying. But the light that used to blaze in her eyes has dimmed into something more cautious. She doesn't ask about my life anymore. I think she knows it's not hers to step into. And me, I don't carry the weight of what happened like I used to. I carry my daughter's lunchbox, Rachel's hand in mine, and the knowledge that I protected what mattered most when it counted. This life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And finally, that's enough.